Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Jenny Aiello, and this is With Love, Jenny, a podcast where we meet ourselves right in the heart of our vulnerability and authenticity. In this sacred space where it's just you and I dive into real life, rich with wisdom and opportunities for deep healing. I explore what it means to truly connect to ourselves, to each other, and to something much greater than us all. In each podcast, I like to meet life right where it touches us most, in our tenderness, in our truth, in our struggles and our strength. So wherever you are on your journey, or whatever it is that you're carrying, no matter how light or heavy, just know I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin today's episode. Hello, beautiful friends. I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. You know, we completed a cycle of the 10 hardest things that I had been through. And this episode sort of could go in that group, but it's intertwined in so many of the stories I've told. And I have done a lot of research on this topic and in an effort to try and better understand it. So this is a tender episode, and it's an important episode. And if I'm being honest, it's one of the episodes I wish someone had handed me years ago, before I ever knew what the word narcissism really meant, long before I had heard of that or had words to describe the confusion, the self-doubt, the self-abandonment, and that very slow unraveling of my own identity inside a few relationships. I wished I had known. I wished I had known more than what I've learned since my last interaction with this specific energy of narcissism. So today we're going to talk about it, not as a weapon, not as a label we throw on people that we don't like. Really don't want you to walk away from this with anything more than a humbleness and a understanding of what it actually is. Because sometimes I think we can use it as a diagnosis and then fling it across the room when someone hurts us, when instead we need to look at it as a psychological structure. It's a way of surviving this world. It's a way of protecting a very fragile and deeply wounded inner self. So my hope is that the conversation in this episode and the next will bring clarity, compassion, and maybe some relief if you're experiencing someone who suffers from this. My hope is that you leave understanding more about the people who have hurt you, and even more importantly, that you understand yourself better. And I want to say this at the very start. If you have ever lost yourself inside of a relationship with a narcissistic person, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. Your reactions were not flaws. They were adaptations. Today, we're going to walk gently into a deeper understanding. And because this topic is so layered, I've created a 2-part series, and I hope I can finish in 2 parts. There is so much to this, you all. So this is part 1, where we lay the foundation and talk a little bit more in depth. Then part 2 will take us into how these kind of relationships might end, or how you can begin to heal once you understand it. But first, we begin with that, the understanding. So take a deep breath with me, and let's begin. So let's start with what narcissism really is. When I used to hear the word narcissist, I thought of people who were arrogant, maybe had vanity, were very concerned about their vanity, or someone who loves themselves too much. But psychologists actually teach something very different. One expert who explains this beautifully is Dr. Jordan Peterson, who says that narcissism has nothing to do with healthy confidence. Instead, it's about a fragile psychological structure, a sense of self that is unstable, shaky, and constantly in danger of collapsing. Imagine building a house on a thin sheet of ice. Every criticism, every boundary, every moment of disagreement feels like a crack forming beneath the feet. Narcissism is not strength, it is precariousness. And this is where Dr. Ramani Dervasula adds a crucial layer. She says narcissism is not arrogance, it's a dysregulated self-esteem. What that means, the person has no stable inner world. Their self-worth swings wildly from I'm amazing to I'm nothing, or I'm amazing to I'm worthless. And they can't regulate themselves from the inside. So they have to regulate it from the outside. Dr. Ramani uses a phrase, and I think it's brilliant. They cannot regulate their sense of self from within, so they outsource it. And that's the key. They depend on others to stabilize themselves. They depend on your praise, your adoration, your admiration, your attention, your reassurance, and all of it becomes emotional oxygen. And if you stop giving oxygen, they panic, they punish, they withdraw, they rage, not because you did something wrong, but because you stop feeding the only thing holding them together. And then there's the depth of what Jonathan Shedler, who explains, narcissism is a defense against unbearable vulnerability. And the key word there is unbearable, not necessarily vulnerability. I don't think anyone really loves feeling vulnerable, but that doesn't make us narcissistic. It's that the defense that we have against it because it is so unbearable that we think we'll die. Somewhere early in life, vulnerability was dangerous. Needing someone else was dangerous. Being ordinary was dangerous. So they built a false self, a mask of superiority or victimhood or specialness that shielded them from the pain underneath. The tragedy is they live behind the armor. They love from behind the armor. They hide behind the armor and they see the world through the cracks of that armor. And anyone who gets too close becomes a threat. I want to pause here and offer a reflection. Many years ago, long before I understood these patterns, I found myself in a relationship, and it was with someone, not a romantic relationship, but it made me question my own reality. I didn't have language for it then, but what I know now is that I was dealing with someone who simply could not tolerate the truth of themselves. And instead of seeing that clearly, I turned the questions inward. I made myself the problem. I took 100% responsibility, even in the midst of being so confused about truth or reality that I couldn't have told you anything about what was happening. So if that's where you've been, you are not alone and you're in the right place to learn more. So we're going to talk about the two types of narcissism, grandiose versus covert. Most people imagine a narcissist as loud, arrogant, demanding, and self-obsessed, someone who thinks they're superior and makes sure everyone knows it. Maybe they walk in the room and everyone feels their energy. They stop and turn around like, what just happened? Someone just entered the room who must be very important, right? And yes, that is only one type of narcissism. It's not the only type. For many, it's not the one they end up in a relationship with. There are the two main expressions of narcissism, and they operate very, very differently. The grandiose narcissist and the vulnerable or covert. Understanding it is not just helpful, but it is the beginning that breaks the spell and brings clarity they've been missing for years if they're in that relationship with someone who's narcissistic. So let's walk through it. Grandiose narcissists are charismatic, charming, confident, dominant, assertive, loud, socially magnetic, and often quite successful. They walk into the space and instantly command attention. They carry themselves like they are the main character in every situation. Often, they brag openly, interrupt others, center conversations around themselves, take credit for others' success, dismiss feelings they don't understand, refuse to admit fault, and expect admiration. They thrive on being visible. They enjoy the performance. They crave the spotlight. They want applause, recognition, and status. This is the kind of narcissist who might dominate a meeting, be the life of the party, position themselves as the smartest person in the room, use intimidation or arrogance to maintain control, minimize others' accomplishments, and show explosive anger when they are criticized. Their ego is external. Their control is overt. You actually can see them coming. Now there's the other, covert narcissism. It is subtle. It is quiet. It is soft and emotionally slippery. A covert narcissist does not present as grandiose. In fact, they often present as the opposite. They may appear sensitive, shy, introverted, anxious, misunderstood, fragile, humble, spiritual, self-sacrificing. They don't boast. They brood. They don't brag. They imply. They don't dominate. They withdraw. They don't explode. They implode. Their control is emotional. It's not loud. And their manipulation comes through vulnerability, not aggression. They might say things like, "Why are you being so mean to me? I guess I'm just a terrible partner. Everyone leaves me eventually. You don't understand how much I'm hurting. If you loved me, you would fill in the blank." They might also alienate in a quiet way. "I don't think your brother likes me." Such a subtle way to position themselves. This will create anxiety and guilt and confusion to the other people. Covert narcissists often weaponize sadness, use emotional fragility to avoid accountability. They play the victim when confronted. They collapse instead of taking responsibility. They sulk or withdraw to punish. They guilt trip rather than argue. They internalize criticism as annihilation, and they undermine boundaries through tears instead of threats. They don't want the spotlight. They want the sympathy. And here's the heartbreaking truth. Their fragility is just as manipulative as grandiosity is. It's just wearing a different mask. Why are covert narcissists harder to identify? And this is a real important distinguishment. Covert narcissists do not look like narcissists. They can actually be teachers, caregivers, artists, empaths on the surface, spiritual leaders, quiet intellectuals, people who are very kind. Their external presentation doesn't match the cultural stereotypes, so their partners often think, "This can't be narcissism. They're so sensitive. This doesn't look like abuse. They're not yelling. They seem wounded. Maybe I should be more gentle. They have such a hard life. I need to be patient. They're not hurting me on purpose. They're just hurting. And hurt people. This is the trap. The victimhood becomes the method of control. You end up over accommodating, over explaining, walking on eggshells, becoming their emotional regulator, taking responsibility for their dysregulation, shrinking your truth so you don't hurt their feelings, apologizing for things you didn't even do. And because their behavior doesn't look like traditional abuse, you might even blame yourself and think, I must be the problem. I must be too harsh. I must be too emotional. I must communicate better. I must try harder. The covert narcissist's greatest weapon is your empathy. I don't know about you, but I've been in a relationship with someone who was a covert narcissist, and I've been in a couple who were the traditional narcissist, the grandiose narcissist. And they were both upsetting. They both had a high cost to them. So let's just review a little bit, because that's a lot and it's real important for the foundation of understanding what it is. Grandiose manipulation looks like intimidation, gaslighting with confidence, overt criticism, dominance, shaming, explosive anger, financial control, blatant entitlement. Where the covert manipulation looks like guilt, withdrawal, silent treatment, passive aggressive comments, emotional collapse, poor me narratives, crying to avoid accountability, rewriting history in soft tones, making you the bad guy for expressing truth, punishing you for expressing truth. They have the same dynamic, but a very different delivery system. So let's talk about how each one of them reacts to boundaries, because the very first thing that you're going to want to learn is how to set boundaries, right? I remember when I first learned about boundaries decades ago, I was setting boundaries up against someone who was a grandiose narcissist. And when you set a boundary, they get loud, aggressive, defensive, insulting. They basically get bigger and they meet your boundary like a wall they want to bulldoze. Covert narcissists, when you set a boundary, they withdraw, cry, shut down, send you on a guilt trip, act deeply wounded. They say, oh, I guess I'm the monster. They make you feel cruel for having your own needs for the boundaries. They meet your boundary like a knife to the chest. Both of these responses have the same purpose: to make you remove the boundary. So in both of these situations, the core wound is the same. This is where spiritual psychology comes in beautifully. Underneath both forms, grandiose and covert, is deep shame, fragile self-esteem, childhood emotional wounds, a deep fear of abandonment, intolerance of criticism, inability to self-regulate, dependency on external validation, avoidance of authentic vulnerability. The mask looks different, but the wound is identical. Dr. Romani says, grandiose and covert narcissists are the two sides of the same coin. One loud, one quiet, both very fragile. Why do people stay with a covert narcissist longer than the grandiose narcissist? This is another powerful insight. So people stay longer with a covert narcissist because they feel responsible for their emotions. They see the wounded child and they want to fix them. They confuse vulnerability with accountability. They don't recognize the dynamic as something abusive. They internalize the blame. The relationship feels emotionally ambiguous. The toxicity is subtle and intermittent. They keep trying to be more and more and more supportive. A covert narcissist doesn't send you running. They keep you leaning in. But leaning in is the trap. There is a soul level impact when you're up against both types of narcissism. Grandiose narcissists will break your identity. Covert narcissists break your reality. Grandiose narcissists make you feel small, unseen, unworthy, overpowered, and diminished, while covert narcissists make you feel confused, guilty, unstable, unsure, anxious, overly responsible. But both make you lose yourself. Both create trauma bonds. Both distort your intuition. And both make you silence the parts of you that know the truth. So let's talk about the behaviors that confuse people. One of the hardest parts about being in a relationship with a narcissist, especially a covert one, is the profound confusion that you'll feel. You don't walk into these relationships thinking, this is toxic, this is manipulative, this is psychological abuse. No. You walk in thinking, this feels familiar, this feels intense, this feels safe at first, this feels like we understand each other. But confusion begins the moment the relationship shifts. And that shift always happens along the way. So let's walk through the most common behaviors that leave people doubting themselves, questioning their reality, and wondering, am I the problem? So the first one of these is love bombing. It's the illusion of a soulmate kind of energy. If you've ever been love bombed, you know that feeling. It's intoxicating. They sweep you up in intensity, affection, attention, passion, future promises, deep conversations, immediate connection. It feels like finally someone sees me. A client struggling with narcissism in her life once told me it felt like we had known each other for lifetimes. I didn't realize it was a performance designed to hook me. You see, love bombing isn't genuine intimacy. It is emotional merging used to create dependency. And because it feels so good, you don't notice the red flags. The second kind is sudden devaluation, when the magic disappears almost overnight. Just as quickly as the affection came, it disappears. The shift can be subtle or immediate, but it always leaves you wondering, what did I do wrong? What has changed? In this phase, they'll begin criticizing you, pulling away, becoming irritated by things that never bothered them before, nitpicking your tone, your words, your choices, withholding affection, acting bored or annoyed, minimizing your feelings. You start analyzing yourself instead of the dynamic. A close friend of mine once said, it felt like I went from being treasured to being tolerated. And that captures it perfectly. In my life, a non-romantic relationship that was very close to me shifted that way. It shifted unexpectedly, and I just couldn't figure it out. But I knew that I really wanted to no longer be in a relationship where I was not wanted and merely tolerated. So, what's the third one? It's the hot and cold behavior. It's an emotional yo-yo. It's one of the most confusing parts of narcissism. They swing between warmth and withdrawal, connection and then distance, affection and then irritation, engagement and then the silent treatment. Just when you're ready to walk away, they pull you back in with softness and compliments and vulnerability. This inconsistency is not accidental, it's conditioning. Your nervous system becomes addicted to the unpredictable cycle. It's at the core of the trauma bonding that we're going to talk about. Your mind wants to leave, and your body wants the next high, the next good moment. Number 4 is gaslighting. It's a very quiet erosion of your reality. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, it's soft, it's quiet. It sounds like, I never said that. You're overreacting. No, you're remembering it wrong. I think you misunderstood. You're too sensitive. I'm concerned about your mental health. Over time, you start doubting your memory, your perceptions, your instincts, your reactions, and your emotional intelligence. For me, all the above. I began doubting myself. I began doubting what I was known for. I began doubting my entire existence. Gaslighting isn't just lying, it's making you distrust your own inner truth. And when that happens, it is a tragedy. It is hard to find your way back. Dr. Jonathan Shedler says gaslighting erodes the foundation of meaning making, meaning that you lose the ability to interpret your own experiences. That same client said, I didn't trust myself enough to leave. And that scared me more than the relationship. Because if you can't trust your own truth, your own inner truth, yourself, how will you ever be okay? The fifth is projection, when their wounds become your fault. Projection happens when they take their own insecurity, their own jealousy, rage, selfishness, abandonment, irresponsibility, and claim that you are the one doing it. A narcissist will accuse you of the very things they are doing. It's stunning when you see it clearly. It truly is a stunning spectacle. When you look back and say, wait a minute, what you're doing is the very thing that you're blaming me for. But in the moment, you can't think clearly. You can't see it clearly because you feel attacked and you don't know why. This keeps you busy defending yourself instead of observing the truth. So if you find yourself having someone tell you over and over that you're insecure or jealous, or you're being selfish or irresponsible, or you're too angry, step back and see what you see clearly before you take it on, before you put meaning into what they're saying. Number 6 is the victimhood as a manipulation. It's the covert narcissist's superpower. This is where they differ from the grandiose ones. The covert narcissists rarely dominate someone. They dissolve them. They turn into the victim the moment you ask for anything. They collapse emotionally, crying, withdrawing, sulking, shutting down, looking devastated, acting confused or wounded. You end up comforting them instead of addressing your need. One of my clients shared this insight. Every time I brought up an issue, I ended up apologizing for hurting his feelings. That is covert manipulation in its purest form. Number 7 is the silent treatment. The punishment without words. This is one of the most damaging behaviors because it's subtle. They withdraw their affection. They ignore your presence. They withhold communication. They stonewall. They act cold and distant. They punish by disappearing emotionally and sometimes physically. And because there are no words, you fill in the blanks. You start questioning, did I do something wrong? Are they really upset with me? How can I fix this? Why am I feeling abandoned? Silence becomes a weapon and your anxiety becomes their control. Number 8, triangulation. This is when they bring others into the dynamic. It's common and it's confusing. It happens when they say things like, everyone agrees you're too sensitive. My friends think you overreact. My therapist said that you're the one who needs to change. Even your family thinks you're too dramatic. Or they suddenly bring someone else into the relationship dynamic. An ex, a coworker, a sibling, a parent, a new friend, a colleague. This destabilizes you. You feel replaced, insecure, compared. It keeps you in competition, and competition will keep you off balance. Number 9, intermittent apologies, which is the cycle of reinforcement. Narcissists don't apologize for healing. They apologize to reset the cycle. Their apologies often sound like, "I'm sorry you feel hurt." "Fine, I'm sorry. Can we move on?" "I didn't realize that you are so sensitive. Let's just forget this ever happened." Or the covert version, "You're right. I'm just a terrible partner. I fail at everything. I don't know why you're still even with me." These are not apologies. They are emotional resets designed to keep you hooked. Number 10, idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. So we're going to go through those. Idealize says you are perfect, magical, soulmate level person. Then they devalue. You are flawed, annoying, too much, not enough. Then you're discard. You're ignored, you're rejected, blamed, replaced, or abandoned emotionally. And the Hoover, they return with charm, apologies, vulnerability, or promises. And this cycle confuses even the strongest people. These behaviors don't confuse you because you're weak. They confuse you because they're designed to. Confusion is the hallmark of narcissistic relationships, and clarity is the beginning of your healing. I spend so much time in confusion. I spend way too much time trying to take responsibility that isn't mine, trying to repair a relationship with a narcissist, which means I have to give up my truth and live in the constant confusion. Now, confusion becomes an immediate clarifying lens for me. It's a very clarifying. When I go into that relationally, I step back and say, what is happening? Confusion isn't always the telltale sign that this person is a narcissist, because there's certainly times where my confusion preceded my own breakthrough. But confusion most definitely is going to be there when a narcissist is in a conversation of accountability. They rewrite history. They flat out divert the conversation or punish you. All these things are real important for you to keep track of, especially if you think you're in a relationship with a narcissist. When I say in a relationship, that can be a brother, a sister, a parent, a child, a distant family member that you interact with. It can be a friend, and it can be a romantic partner or a spouse. No one is immune from this traumatic separation from their own self and identity, which is tragic. It's tragic when this happens to a little child who grows up to become a narcissist. Let's talk about narcissistic injury and rage, because one of the most defining and confusing characteristics of narcissism is what psychologists call a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury happens when the narcissist's false self, the delicate, carefully crafted illusion of perfection and superiority, becomes threatened. To you, it may look like a simple boundary, a mild disagreement, a request for clarity, a moment of feedback, a calm, neutral no, or even just your emotional independence. But to them, it feels like annihilation. Their false self cracks and they panic. It's not aggression. It's not drama. This is how their nervous system experiences a threat. And instead of saying, oh, that hurt my feelings, their reaction is more like, you have attacked the entire foundation of who I am. This internal collapse often happens at lightning speed, which can catch you off guard and then lead you into more confusion. Why does this happen? Healthy people have an internal sense of self that can tolerate discomfort, criticism, and conflict. Narcissistic people do not. They have no internal container for difficult emotions. So when you disagree, express a boundary, call out a contradiction, or have a need of your own. Their mind interprets it as you are saying I'm defective. You are rejecting me. You are abandoning me. You are exposing me. And this activates deep, deep childhood wounds. Wounds of shame, humiliation, fear of inadequacy, terror of being seen as ordinary or flawed, and the panic of losing control over their narrative. This is the moment when narcissistic injury turns into narcissistic rage. So let's talk about that. What does narcissistic rage look like? Well, it doesn't always look like screaming or throwing things, although sometimes it does. It can also look like explosive rage, yelling, insults, verbal attacks, character assassination, blaming, explosive defensiveness, threats of leaving, dramatic outbursts. Cold rage is from covert narcissists. Cold rage looks like a silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, coldness, shut down, brooding, long-term resentment, passive-aggressive comments, an icy distance. Both of them are rage. One burns the house down, one freezes everything inside it. Someone said once, I used to fear the yelling, but the silence, well, it's worse. You can't negotiate with someone who disappears emotionally. Why does rage feel so personal then, if that's what it is? And here's the heartbreaking part. Narcissistic rage has nothing to do with you. You simply triggered the wound. You did not create it. Their reaction is not about the moment. It's about the meaning they attach to that moment. And to them, your boundary is not a boundary. Your boundary is a form of betrayal. Your truth is not truth. It's disrespect. Your needs are not needs. They are accusations. Your emotional independence is not independence. It's abandonment. And because you cannot tolerate the idea of being flawed or responsible, they must make you the villain. Because they cannot tolerate the idea of being flawed or responsible for something, they have to make you the villain. So let's talk about typical rage responses. The most common responses during a narcissistic injury is blame shifting. Suddenly, the issue is your fault, not theirs. Gaslighting, you're making things up. You're remembering it wrong. Projection, you're the selfish one. You're the one who caused this. Minimizing, you're blowing this out of proportion. Character attack, you're unstable. You're impossible to please. The victim stance, I guess I'm just a terrible person. Everyone always hurts me. Retaliation, subtle or overt punishment, silence, distance, revenge, and coldness. A smear campaign, they tell others a distorted version of the story. Threats, leaving, withholding affection, emotional blackmail. All these behaviors confuse you because they escalate out of proportion, and you think, what just happened? How did we get here? And the shame spiral begins. Then there's the nervous system perspective. Through the trauma lens, their brain goes into fight or flight the moment their ego feels threatened. Your calmness doesn't soothe them. Your logic doesn't teach them. Your kindness doesn't de-escalate them. Their nervous system is not responding to you, it's responding to their own internal chaos. A client once said to me, I finally realized I wasn't arguing with an adult. I was arguing with a frightened child wearing adult skin. What a powerful truth. So, what do you do? Or why can't a narcissist handle criticism? Even a gentle criticism. Why can't a narcissist take it? Because to them, criticism, even mild, loving, or very soft, gentle feedback collides directly with their biggest fear, the fear of being ordinary, imperfect, or unworthy. So they fight to preserve the illusion. I didn't do that. You misunderstood. You're too sensitive. That's not what happened. Why are you attacking me? You're always overreacting. Criticism is not a moment of tension. It's a moment of identity collapse. And identity collapse leads to rage. And here's the key. Narcissistic rage, it's temporary. It feels huge in the moment, even overwhelming or violent or paralyzing. But it's merely a reaction, not a reality. Once their ego stabilizes, their charm returns, their logic returns, their soft tones return, their vulnerability returns. This is the cycle that continues. And you think, maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe if I communicated differently. But that pattern always repeats itself. And that's how you know. Narcissistic rage isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of how fragile their inner world really is. And then you understand the wound underneath it. And once you do that, you stop taking the rage personally. I will tell you, my firsthand experience was with that. Someone, a visitor in our home, who I had long since identified as a possible narcissist, had a moment of rage, of narcissistic rage. And it was directed at me, and it was extremely personal. It was extremely, they accused, attacking my integrity, a huge character attack, huge victim stance, just a smear campaign. And even when I tried to diffuse that, it went on. It went on, and it was deeply personal attacks. And I had a moment of clarity early in it. I didn't react. I didn't take not one bit of it on, because none of it was based in truth. When I put the truth in front of this person, the rage escalated. The more I spoke truth, the lower the blow, so to speak. And I just stood in my truth. And they left. They left very angry, very flustered, very dysregulated, I would say. I didn't laugh. I didn't disrespect this person. I just spoke truth. And then I set a boundary. I set a boundary of, I won't interact with someone who has such a low opinion of me. And I have kept my word to that. It's a boundary because of the, not just me, but others who were a victim of that rage. And even though it's, temporary, it doesn't take away the fact that it can be very hurtful. And so it's recognizing that you've done nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. And, you have to keep that perspective in the heat of the moment. You have to keep that. So, try to not take rage personally. Let it pass. And then set boundaries. So let's talk trauma bonds and what they are and how they work. Trauma bonding is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in a narcissistic relationship. And honestly, it's one of the hardest to talk about because it touches the deepest place inside of us. People often will say, well, why didn't you leave sooner? Or why didn't you put up that boundary quicker? Why did you excuse so much? Why did you look the other way so often? How did I become so attached to someone that continued to hurt me? What was wrong with me? And I want you to hear this with your whole heart. Nothing was wrong with you. You were trauma bonded. So let's talk about what that means exactly and why it happens to even the strongest, healthiest, and most intelligent people. Trauma bonding is not weakness, it's a biology. Trauma bonding forms when your nervous system becomes conditioned by intermittent reinforcement. That means emotions go up, then down. Affection comes, then disappears. Safety appears, then evaporates. Closeness arrives, then it collapses. Connections feel real and then suddenly break. The cycle releases powerful chemicals in the brain. There's dopamine during the affection, cortisol during conflict or abandonment, oxytocin during reconnection, and then adrenaline during instability. This chemical cocktail creates an addictive loop. Your nervous system starts chasing the good moments because the good moments are unpredictable and intense, just like gambling, like addiction, just like any cycle with highs and lows. Your body becomes hooked on the hope of emotional relief. This cycle creates dependency. Trauma bonding makes you feel attached through fear, through longing, stress, hope, relief, confusion, emotional collapse, emotional reunion. And the deeper this cycle goes, the stronger the bond becomes. And you begin thinking, they're the only one who can make this pain go away. If I just try harder, the good moments will come back. This isn't abuse, it's intensity. Trauma bonds are not formed through cruelty, they're formed through inconsistency. And that's what confuses the nervous system. Trauma bonding also feels like soul connection, but it isn't. People often mistake trauma bonding for soulmate energy because it feels powerful, it feels fated, karmic, and familiar. But familiar doesn't mean safe. Familiar doesn't mean healthy, and familiar doesn't mean love. It often means childhood wounds being reactivated, old coping mechanisms resurfacing, inner child longing for emotional repair, survival patterns being reenacted. Trauma bonding feels like destiny because the wound feels like ancient. Why you felt so responsible? Because in a trauma bond, you become the stabilizer. You adjust your tone, your behavior, your moods, your truths, your boundaries, your emotions, your needs, your desires, all to keep the peace. You become the emotional regulator in the relationship because they never learned to be one for themselves. This is why you may have shown behaviors that you're not proud of. You weren't being narcissistic, you were being adaptive. And you were trying to survive unpredictability. The cycle will always come back around. Here's the hardest part. In trauma bonds, the good version of them always returns. Just long enough to restore hope, reset the dynamic, pull you back in, make you second guess leaving, trigger the dopamine surge in your brain, reconnect emotionally, smooth over the wounds, rewrite the pain as just a bad moment. And then this moment of reconnection feels like oxygen after you've been drowning. And that relief makes the bond stronger, not the love. This is why people stay, not because they're weak, because they're neurologically entangled. Trauma bonding is rooted in childhood survival. So this is deeply spiritual and deeply psychological. Trauma bonds often mirror old patterns from childhood. With inconsistent caregiving, an unavailable parent, a critical parent, a parent who oscillated between affection and withdrawal, a parent who made love conditional, chaos that normalized unpredictability. Your adult body is trying to resolve what your childhood body survived. This is why trauma bonds feel so magnetic. They are not attraction, they are reenactment. If you grew up in emotional chaos, your nervous system will seek familiarity, even if familiarity is unhealthy. Also, trauma bonds make you lose yourself. Over time, you lose connection to your intuition, your voice, your identity, your boundaries, your sense of worth, your emotional autonomy, and your inner truth. You start living in reaction instead of creation. You stop making decisions. You start managing someone's moods. You stop asking, what do I want? And you start asking, how do I keep this person calm? You lose the parts of you that once felt vibrant, alive, and grounded. This is the deepest cost of trauma bonding. You lose yourself long before you leave the relationship. Trauma bonding is not your fault. I want to pause here and say something directly. You did not choose to stay. Your body chose to survive. You did not choose to stay. Your body chose to survive. Trauma bonds are created through manipulation, intermittent affection, chemical highs, emotional lows, psychological conditioning, and nervous system imprinting. You were never stupid. You were never weak. You were never broken. You are simply responding exactly how a human responds to trauma and intermittent reward. Dr. Ramani says people don't stay with narcissists because they're weak. They stay because the narcissist weaponizes hope. Hope is the hook. It's the trap. It's the prison. But the moment you begin to see that pattern, the trauma bond starts to break. Healing begins when you recognize the pattern, when you name it honestly. You stop blaming yourself. You stop trying to fix the other person. You begin rebuilding your internal safety. You reconnect to your intuition. You start practicing boundaries, even if they make it worse. You remember you have a self inside that needs you. Healthy relationships feel stable. Trauma bonds feel like chaos mixed with longing. The more clarity you gain, the weaker the bond becomes. And eventually you say, I deserve better than this cycle. I deserve peace. I deserve consistency. I deserve emotional safety. I deserve myself back. And that is the beginning of freedom. Trauma bonding isn't a sign that you love deeply. It's a sign that you survive deeply. And now your healing can begin. So I'm going to close here. You guys, I have so much research. And I've been a victim of narcissism so many times. I feel like I've learned enough that I spot it quicker, and I'm more careful around not just judging or labeling someone, because I don't do that. I'm the opposite. I see divinity in everyone, and I honor that. But sometimes it leads us right into a narcissist's snare. So for that reason, I really want to dedicate time to all the different aspects, because even the nature of the relationship changes how you deal with a narcissist. It impacts more than just the person. It impacts families, how you deal with it, how you handle the process of recognizing it. It costs you. It costs you either way. So we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks in the next episode. And I hope you'll tune in. And I really would love to hear from you. If you're someone who's in a relationship with someone you might think is a narcissist, and what you're doing to heal, what you're doing about it, or even if you're starting to question, what if that's what it is? How do I make it work? You're going to want to tune in, okay? So I've covered a lot today, and we're going to talk about this again and dive deeper into this very, very fascinating, psychologically, heartbreaking, relationally, and faith-building in many ways journey with narcissism. The first question that we're going to address in the next episode is, what if I'm the narcissist? And we'll talk about that in our next broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. If this has been interesting you, please email me. Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you would subscribe or follow our little podcast, it helps. It gives you notifications when we drop our next podcast. But it also helps me. It helps me grow my audience. If you know someone who's in a relationship with a narcissist that might find value in this series, please share this with them and ask them to subscribe or follow. Wherever you are on your journey, if you listen to this completely and you have more questions than answers, just sit with that. Sit with the questions, tune in to the next episode, and from there, you will maybe gain a little bit more clarity. And I hope this has been as helpful for you as all this research was for me. So please subscribe or follow. Give me a like. If nothing else, that helps us so much here at Wholehearted Coaching and knowing what topics inspire you. I am so excited about what is coming up next year in the year of 2026. I don't know when you're listening to this because this broadcast is timeless because narcissism will probably never cease to exist. But right now we're coming to the end of 2025 and I'm looking ahead to the new year with so much joy and anticipation. And I hope you will follow us into the new year and join us at some of our live events, mainly a retreat or some of the live community calls and things that are going to be coming your way. Thank you again for being here. Reach out to me if you would like to. Visit my website. All of that is in the show notes. Okay? That's it. That's me signing off. I hope that you will do some reflection. I hope that you will have compassion if you're in a difficult relationship. I hope that you take the high road as you work your way through that. And I'm always available as a spiritual psychology practitioner, E4 method, and E4 trauma coach. And I'm happy to talk to you to see if you're a match for one of my coaching programs. Okay, everyone. I'm signing off. Until next time, take care. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you found a spark of wisdom to carry with you and maybe even a deeper invitation to heal and grow and transform through your own beautiful story. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone who could use encouragement. And if so, I hope you will share it with them. If you'd like to learn more about working with me or attending one of my healing retreats, coaching programs, and other offerings, you can visit my website at jennyaiello.com or email me directly at jenny@jaiello.com. You'll find all the links in the show notes. If today's episode touched you, it would mean the world if you would leave a review or share it with someone who might need it, or just reach out and let me know how it landed for you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm building something special here. Real stories, real life, real connection. One episode, one heart, and one story at a time. As always, with love. Oh, and this is the legal message, but mostly a message from my heart, and I just need to share this with you right now. Please know this podcast is offered solely for educational and entertainment purposes. If you find yourself triggered due to anything that was shared in this podcast, please seek professional help. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for mental health services. While I am a professional life coach, I am not a psychotherapist, nor am I a mental health clinician. So if you are struggling emotionally, please seek help because you matter, you are important, and most of all, you are worthy of doing this work, the work that leads you to a better and healthier place. Okay? All right. Thank you. And please always make enough time to take care of yourself and do so with love.